then we have to choose between who we want to be friends with, right?
Yeah.
It's either US and who have done things that you just mentioned, or China, a communist dictatorship. So it's like, who should I be a friend with?
My name is James Lee, and you're watching Beyond the Headlines on Breaking Points. Amidst the bustling streets and serene landscapes of Taiwan is an island celebrated for its crucial role in global technology, but also its vibrant democracy. And with the country's presidential inauguration right around the corner, and China looming ominously in the background, I think it's important to hear directly from the Taiwanese people about what they want their future to look like. In part one of this series, I went on the ground in Taipei asking Taiwanese locals about how they view their national identity, their relationship with China, their views on the US, and their aspirations for the future. You can find that video on my YouTube channel, the link is provided below. But today, joining us on Breaking Points to share their perspectives on everything Taiwan is Kylie Wang and Ken Young, hosts of Bilingual News. They call their show the freest international news podcast in the Chinese-speaking world. Others have likened them to being the Joe Rogans of Taiwan. I've heard that as well. And based on my listening, the program could definitely be viewed as a pretty good proxy for mainstream Taiwanese politics and culture. So, Ken, Kylie, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, and I'm just like, it's so flattering for how you introduce that, but thank you very much.
Did I get that introduction right, by the way? I'm curious how you would characterize yourselves to the audience in terms of your show and also your own personal ideologies and beliefs.
I mean, we try to present different perspectives, that's for sure. But I don't know if we can call ourselves Joe Rogan. I don't think we are that controversial yet.
Yeah, we're getting there, but we're not there yet. Because we just speak our mind freely, and sometimes we catch heat from left and right at the same time. So,
say something wrong, we
Yeah.
sometimes apologize for something
Yeah.
that we wish we could say better. I don't think we are that.
But we're getting there. I think we're getting there.
You think so? Okay, then. Then we'll take it.
Maybe today. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you guys because I think in the West, or in the US, we rarely get to hear directly from voices representing Taiwan. It's usually just news reporting, headlines like anti-Beijing party wins in Taiwan, big F you to China. So I'm curious, what do you guys think the average voter in Taiwan, what are the issues that they care about? Is it just China policy? Is it the economy, social issues? Tell us more about your average, Taiwanese voter.
I think for Taiwanese voter, I think China is definitely number one in our head all the time because there's always fighter jet flying into our territory. It's just like it's nonstop. So of course it's on our mind. But also other than that, there's domestic issues that people want to talk about, like electricity issue, water issue. There are problems left and right. But when it comes to election, it usually become Taiwan versus China, US versus China. Like China always dominate the conversation. So it's difficult for smaller parties who want to focus on domestic issues to actually be heard, right?
Yeah, because especially young people, we care about like housing prices, income disparity. So these are really important too. But a lot of time, because election usually focus on China, US issues all the time. So it's really hard to raise issues to talk about these domestic issues.
Yeah. Also, it doesn't help when during the election season, China would, usually test their missiles or fly fighter jets. It doesn't really help with with anything else. So in the end, it becomes a China centric election usually all the time.
You mentioned China there a little bit in terms of during election time. In the US, we have a lot of discussion on both sides. Honestly, both parties claim election interference all the time for different people, whether it be Russia or China or whatever other country. So have you guys experienced something similar in Taiwan with election interference, and what does that look like there?
Oh, election interference from China is massive in Taiwan. Like their disinformation campaign has been going on for, I don't know, for the past
decades.
Because we're so close with to them and we speak the same languages, right? And there are so many people in Taiwan doing business with China. So there's just like disinformation from China infiltrating Taiwan all the time. So for example, during the election season, we'll see that maybe I don't know if this is true in the US, but in Taiwan, we have a lot of messenger apps, and a lot of senior people would be in those chat groups, right? And there would just be a lot of disinformation floating around in those chat groups and affecting those people's willingness to vote. That's one of them, or their vote or the party that they would support, right?
Yeah, or a lot of like scandals will be associated with it. And it's really hard to tell what is the reality and what is the campaign from China.
Because sometimes we have some maybe issues with our government, maybe smaller issues. Like for example, last year we have some issues with running out of eggs, right? But which is a reality. But when China's disinformation campaign adds on top of it, it went from a small issues to like a nationwide panic. So everyone is rushing to the supermarket and trying to look for eggs. So in the beginning, it wasn't that big of a shortage, and with the China disinformation campaign, the whole thing got amplified, so it became a mess.
Yeah, that's an interesting. So what does the media landscape look like in Taiwan, right? So in the US, we obviously have the traditional media, a lot of erosion in trust when it comes to the mainstream news. We're seeing a rise in power and influence from independent media, which is, I think, why Congress pushed through that TikTok ban very, very quickly. But what's the situation like in Taiwan, and how does that, where is the China interference coming from? What sources are actually truly independent? What's being controlled by political parties? And if you can just give us kind of an overview.
Yeah, I would say that probably most of our traditional media that you see on TV are controlled by political parties, right?
Yeah,
you say so.
We will say so.
And also the newspaper is also pretty much.
We have a major television outlet that's controlled by CCP that everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And then we have, of course, DPP leaning TV and also KMT leaning TV. So everybody knows it. Yeah. And then different age groups kind of rely on different sources of information, and they like to hear, only the voice they like to hear. So it's really, really, it's really similar to the US, I guess.
I think in that aspect, it's really similar to the US. And also, I think in Taiwan, in the recent years, independent media has become more and more prominent because a lot of young people, actually, I would just say a lot of people are fed up with the current situation with the media landscape in Taiwan. So people just go to the new independent news that's available online. Like, even though those are smaller medias, but people will just feel that they are more trustworthy. But I think in Taiwan right now, I think internet influencers also affects policies or politics or elections a lot as well.
Like,
right?
Us.
I think we are one of the few that could affect the political landscape. But there's also some online game streamers. What's his name? Guan Zhang. There's a we will call him like the Joe Rogan of Taiwan because he practices MMA and he owns a few gyms. But he also does game live stream, and he also talk about political issues. He also is a prolific figure in Taiwanese politics because during the election season, a lot of candidates will go onto his live stream to talk about their policies and their views, and he has a lot of audience too.
Yeah, from all perspectives and from all parties.
Yeah,
and he's pretty controversy for a lot
of he's quite
too.
Controversial because he had actually supported all three major parties in Taiwan. He in the beginning supported KMT, and then he supported DPP. Recently, he supports this new
Taiwan People's Party.
Taiwan People Party. So he went, he supported all of them. So it's pretty interesting.
But speaking of trust, do people typically trust the government? Because I know the DPP has won 3 straight elections, pretty impressive. The electoral success is quite impressive. So I assume there's some level of trust there, but how does that shake out in terms of how people view the government?
I would definitely say that people trust the government
more than
the US a little bit. Like the current ruling party, DPP, this is their third term guy elected to run the country. So I think people have a lot of trust in them, but also because it's their third term. So a lot of people would say that, hey, all these issues that you promised to fix when the first president of your party came, you say you're going to fix it, but this is the third term. This is going to be the start of your, the ninth year.
I would say people people use amplifying lenses to look at the third term of the ruling party. That's for
magnifying
sure.
glass.
Magnifying. So I guess it's gonna be hard for William Lai.
Lai Ching-te.
Lai Ching-te.
Yeah,
It's gonna be hard for him. And of course, as we mentioned, that because of the disinformation campaign from China, so a lot of time it's really hard to raise issues when we want to talk about domestic issues. And some people say that, oh, maybe some information is disinformation from China. So it's really hard to really focus on how to fix our domestic issues altogether. I think that affects the trust towards the government too.
So I think that this is the big issue that the DPP has to face. And also I think one of the things that they say they were gonna fix it but didn't, I think it's like they say that they're gonna try to communicate more with China. But the thing is that that's the inherent sin of the ruling party, DPP, because the DPP pride itself on being a tough guy against China, you know, saying that Taiwan is a country. So if they want to have a conversation with China, China would just say, hey, we don't recognize you as a country. So being that party's leader or being that party's president, we don't want to talk to you. So without a proper communication channel, I think it's actually quite dangerous for Taiwan and China, even the US, because without proper communication, there might be misreading on people's actions, right? So misreading could cause you know, errors or escalations, and that's no one want to see that in the world right now with things going on in Gaza and in Ukraine, right? I don't think people want another situation in Asia.
So that reminds me, I did watch one of your episodes that you did after Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in 2022, and you guys seemed very positive about that visit. I also saw you interview some people who were not as positive about her visit. Can you talk a little bit more about those two divergent views in Taiwan, and what kind of relationship do you think Taiwan should have with the US?
I think during the Pelosi's visit, I think most people in Taiwan are happy that she's here. The reason why people are happy is because that, hey, we're recognized as a country, and you know,
as an ally.
As an ally, sorry. She came here to value us as an important ally, right? So for us, we're very happy saying, hey, we are being we're seen, right? Because as a Taiwanese, for the past, I don't know how many years, we're not really talked about in the international community because of China's pressure, right? And we're not really part of any international organization other than WTO. And even for Olympics, we have to join in as Chinese Taipei instead of Taiwan. So those are pressures from China, but that aside, so Pelosi's visit, people really like it, but at the same time, there are people who are opposing it because people feel that this is triggering China. You don't want to, you know, give China a reason to fly more fighter jets or do more actions or have their warships entering your territory.
Yeah, I always find it really interesting to see international varied reactions to figures like Nancy Pelosi, particularly from the international perspectives, because she's someone who I view as one of the most corrupt politicians in the United States. Like everybody here on both sides hates her. She's somehow, you know, the best stock trader ever. You know,
yeah, she
100 times better than Warren Buffett.
200 something million, right?
Yeah, and she only makes $170,000 a year, so I don't know how that works. And then anybody who tries to run against her in Congress, they always turn out to be somehow racist or sexist. I don't know how that. Anyways, I digress a little bit. But in general, when I think about, you know, U.S. foreign policy, there's always this question, you know, whether those kinds of trips are shows of support, like you're talking about potentially, or are they disguised acts of provocation? Because, you know, being in U.S. politics, we kind of know that they like to a lot of times play both sides a little bit. They talk about Taiwanese sovereignty and how important that is, but we also have this one China policy. There's also a long history of the U.S. Meddling in foreign affairs. In some cases, the U.S. will overthrow democracies for their own interests. And we also have the military-industrial complex as a big part of the political landscape. Selling billions in weapons is very important for them. They also want this sustained influence in Asia. So when I think about all these things, when I factor it all together, sometimes the conclusion that I come to is is the only unacceptable political outcome for the US is if Taiwan somehow manages to find peace with China. Like, imagine tomorrow if China was like, all right, Taiwan, you are free and you are independent, no further issues. That, I think, would be deeply against US interests. So I'm curious, what's your reaction to that? From the Taiwanese, do you agree with any of that, or is that way off base?
I think we agree, but because in Taiwan, people talk about this, right? Like, oh, why are we spending so much money buying weapons from the US? Why are we not spending those money to fix our domestic issues? Stuff like that happens. But I think that's the US perspective. But being in Taiwan, which is like right next to China, then we have to choose between who we want to be friends with, right?
Yeah.
It's either US and who have done things that you just mentioned, or China, a communist dictatorship. So it's like, who should I be friend with? Maybe US is better. Like for a period of time, Taiwan was actually really close to China, right?
Yeah.
During Ma Ying-jeou's presidency, that's like 8-9 years ago. We're really close with China. And then what happened was that in Taiwanese society, we realized we became over reliant on China. Everything's manufactured there, and they have so much sway on Taiwanese economy. Like, we're fully dependent on them. So after we switch to the next president, Tsai Ing-wen, I think we slowly to move our production or our reliance on China. Like, we decrease it slowly, and it turns out in the beginning there was a lot of fightbacks. People are saying like, hey, why are you doing this? Our economy is gonna be destroyed. But when COVID hits, we're like, oh, thank God we did that ahead of time. So you don't really know what's gonna happen next. So we just like, but for Kaidi and I, between China and US, we would definitely pick US. Definitely a better friend than China.
I think that people now understand that it's really important to diversify the risk. And then of course we also need to know that US has its own interests. We can't heavily rely on US. We need to rely on ourselves too. That's why we think it's really important to really enhance our security, and then buy some weapons that we can defend ourselves. So I know, but at the same time, not to enhance or escalate the tension. That's why we think that our president is really important to be really careful and cautious, and to play around with that, dangerous balance.
Try to get the delicate balance between Taiwan and China.
So that's why elections always complicated, because everybody has their own imagination of how that balance
should look like. So it's tough.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, it is an absolutely difficult situation. So I'm curious, so in terms of independence, I think the last opinion poll I saw, the majority of Taiwanese people support independence. So what does independence really look like when you talk in this kind of nuance and complicated situation? What is independence?
I think for me, actually, independence would look like, without, just like you say, China say, Taiwan, you're good. Let's have peace, and you're on your own now. And Taiwan can be officially have a lot of join those international organizations, have trade agreements with countries that we want to be friends with, and just without the Chinese pressure that's looming over our head all the time. So Taiwan, we can actually focus on our domestic issues.
But I mean, that's like the ultimate goal.
That's the ultimate goal, right? That's why it looks like in my mind, right? But
yeah, but I would say my bar is low, because I know it would be really hard for China to say, okay, Taiwan, you're free.
It's not gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen. So maybe we can try to have a stronger economy, that's for sure, and that we can protect ourselves, and then be recognized in international organizations, and then
I don't think we see that US has tried to pull out from multiple international organizations all the time, right? Because a lot of these organizations are too big, too old, too cumbersome, too inefficient. We understand, but from our perspective, we're not in any of them. So we're like, oh shoot, we don't have those layers of protections or allies that we can really count on. then that's another issue, right? Like it's two extremes. Your like US is one extreme and Taiwan is another one. So for us having more international allies, it's really important for us, especially during these days.
What is and I think this is maybe a good closing question. What does it mean to be Taiwanese, and what do you want the future to look like?
I think a Taiwanese is someone who can speak Mandarin freely in, right? Because let's call back to the beginning. You say you introduce us as the freest podcast in the Chinese speaking world. Why do we say that? Because there's no other place that speaks Chinese, which is probably largest or second largest language in the world right now. Taiwan is the only place that you can speak it freely. That's insane. Like you cannot do it in China, you cannot do it in Hong Kong, not Macau, nowhere else. So we want to keep our freedom in Taiwan, and it's very important.
And I'm a comedian. Freedom of speech is really important for me. And I know a lot of comedians from China. They are really good, and they have a lot of things that they would love to make jokes of, but they can't do it. So they come to Taiwan sometimes on a visit, and they will secretly come to our comedy clubs to crack jokes freely. And that really moves me. And I want to protect our land, to have that freedom for everyone who longs for democracy. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that, okay, so one last question, because you brought up freedom of speech, and it's also something really important to me. I'm just curious, is there anything you guys can't talk about culturally or politically in Taiwan? Like in the US, we have freedom of speech, but there's definitely still censorship. There's like topics where you could lose your job, or your life could be very difficult. Like if you hold some position that is against like the more liberal social causes, or if you're, now in this case, we've learned if you're anti-Israel, it's really difficult for you to really operate out here. So are there positions in Taiwan that are kind of off limits? Are you able to be pro-China in Taiwan? Is that allowed or no?
I think you're allowed, because we actually have a political party that's pro-China, but they don't get any votes. It's called Tongchudang. They want to unify with China with all their hearts.
We hate them, but
I hate them, and nobody really likes them. And I think their party leader is a prominent gangster, like a mafia, like a triad, like, if you will. It's insane. So they're not really that popular. But if you want to say that you're pro-China, sure, you can do it, but you just won't make any friends.
So it is okay. So that is sort of off limits a little bit there.
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, no, I want to thank you both, Kylie and Ken. It's super rare, I think, that we get, in the US, these kinds of opportunities to learn from other countries directly and learn about the culture straight from the source. So I really appreciate you guys for coming on. And if there are any listeners here on Breaking Points who are bilingual, want to hear more of you guys' show, where can people find more of you guys?
I just search Bilingual News on YouTube, and you guys can find me. BAILINGGUO, because I use pinyin. Yeah. And
all right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that is it for me this week. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. If you want to learn more about Taiwan, I was literally on the ground talking to real Taiwanese people to ask them their feelings about their national identity, China, America, their vision for the future of Taiwan. That video is on my YouTube channel, 5149 with James Lee. Go check that out and subscribe. As always, I'd like to thank you for your time, and keep on tuning into Breaking Points.